So this passage from Till Spiegel is definitely a technical challenge for us as bassoon players. I would encourage everyone to listen to the entire piece. Make sure you find a recording, listen along so you get kind of the spirit and character of this piece, that really you just have to listen to it, and getting that in your head will already give you a great start into kind of understanding what we're looking for in this excerpt. So from the beginning, we're in 6/8 time. So we want to be very careful about our rhythm, especially that 8th rest coming in at the right time. It's easy to get distracted by the technique, and then our rhythm kind of suffers. So it's fortissimo. This whole string of 16th notes really should be very, very big, very full sound. So keep spinning the air through the instrument. Don't allow your sound to back off once we kind of get in the middle of the passage. Make sure that you still keep that fortissimo going. Because as you can tell after you've practiced this a little bit, there's two main sections here. We have all these 16th notes, and then we get into this 8th note passage and the little solo at the end, which is a different character, where we have mezzo forte and we have pianissimo later. So the more we can do on sustaining our fortissimo, the more of a contrast we can have later when we go to a softer dynamic. So as we're practicing it, the key to this one is really practicing it slow, doing some rhythm variations in your technique, and being patient with it, going slow and breaking it apart into measure by measure, beat by beat, until you can work on that finger coordination. And while you're doing all that slow practicing, practice it fortissimo, keep engaging the air into the instrument. So again, we have a tempo marking as the dotted quarter note as 104. That I would do that, towards the end when you're ready to record and perform this. You can work on the dotted quarter note pulse a little bit more, but I would start with an 8th note pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Da da dum, da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dum. It's going to be the most helpful to work on this coordination with an 8th note pulse on your metronome. Ba da dum. We want to feel kind of a silent 8th note or imaginary 8th note in that rest, so that we make sure that we come in on our high C at the right time. So before you start, I would count one full measure in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ba da dum, ba da dee da 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 da. In order to make sure that that rhythm is correct. And then I like to lean on the downbeats of each of these. Ba da dum, da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. It gives me a little bit of structure. It kind of anchors it down and keeps my fingers from just kind of flying wildly out of control. So I would recommend practicing it that way, very slowly. And when you start, just work on the first 3 notes. Until that feels comfortable to you. And honestly, adding 1 note at a time is a really successful strategy for practicing. That's just one technique. If you haven't tried that before, that gives you a variation for practicing this. Working 1 beat at a time until you clean it up. And doing repetitions on each beat until you feel like you've got that under control, and then you can put that together in the longer stream. One thing to watch out for is the 3rd measure of the excerpt, making sure that we come in on time. From the 8th note, we have an 8th note B flat in tenor clef. Jum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum. And don't take too much time after the downbeat 8th note that's tied over, because oftentimes we come in a little bit late. So make sure that you're ready. Da 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 dum. Still sustaining fortissimo in the C half note, in the C, the lower octave C trill, still sustaining forte and that energy throughout that trill. So the second half of this, we have these staccato. It's still mezzo forte, so we don't drop the dynamic down too much. It's still staccato, but we want really clean, flicked tenor register notes. So I'm going to speed this passage up just because it's not as technical of a challenge. So this is back to the dotted quarter note as being our pulse. Make sure that those notes are speaking cleanly, and I always recommend to my students to flick our C's, B naturals, B flats. So if you really listen for it, and if you hear any kind of junk on the beginning of the articulation, make sure that you're using your left thumb flip keys to correct that problem. This passage, if you follow that, stay right in rhythm, the section between measure 32 and 33 should go fine. Measure 33, while it is marked pianissimo, it's a solo. And so the most important thing here is not to be super, super, super soft. We still want it expressive. So the pianissimo, we want it soft. You don't want to play, aggressive fortissimo. We want it a little bit softer, but the pianissimo kind of gives it this playful character. We really want it to dive into the character. This is kind of the motive, one of the motives of the piece. Be very careful of your tied over notes and all the rhythms in here, and continuous airflow. Don't over adjust for be-da-dum, bum, bum, bum. Don't adjust your embouchure too much or your airflow. Try to keep constant breath support. It's going to help those awkward intervals to speak. And again, feeling that downbeat when we have our syncopated high G sharp, to make sure that we come out of that rhythm at the correct time is very important. And then the last scale towards the end, we can really make sure we get a good, crisp, clean, quiet pianissimo. And the last note is super important. So even on these dotted half notes, use a little bit of vibrato, spin your sound, and show that you can end the excerpt in a really beautiful, tapered way.